Welcome to Spectral Shadows. This is the place where the stories don't just haunt your mind, they follow you into the dark. Before the whispers begin, tell me, where are you watching from and what time is it? Midnight? Or closer to the hour when shadows move on their own? If you're brave enough to continue, prove it. Like this video, subscribe to Spectral Shadows and leave a comment with your time and location, so we'll know exactly where to find you. Now, let's open the door to tonight's nightmare. Story number 1. I can't get infections, I can't get sick. I regrow my organs in a matter of seconds. I can regenerate a liter of blood every 10 seconds. My limbs aren't an issue either. I have what can be best understood as a massive healing factor. I've always had it, the healing factor. Ever since I was a kid, I've never scraped my knee, never caught a cold, never had to go to the nurse, and never broken a bone, despite participating in various sports. Everybody initially assumed I had a strong immune system, or was simply lucky. I went most of my life believing I was just a lucky guy. When I went in for my vaccinations, the doctors said my skin was unusually thick, and they had to inject me quickly and remove the needle even quicker. I never even got drunk. No matter how many shots I took, I never got even tipsy, nor did I ever vomit. I always attributed that to some sort of immunity. Nothing I smoked in my teens got me anywhere either. I was in a car accident when I was 22. It was bad. I rolled 4 times and ended up crushed between the car that rear-ended me and a tree. The car was totaled, and I should have been too. I thought I was dead when I saw my shattered leg begin to crack and force itself back together, when the blood that poured out of my head suddenly became a trickle, then nothing. What eyesight I had left in my eyes came back just as quickly. Doctors called it a miracle that I walked away from that accident. Most that had to be done was cutting me out of the car. I knew what I saw, but the doctors told me I was probably just hallucinating from the accident. When I didn't have even a little whiplash in the morning, I went to the hospital. I thought I was in shock, and I wanted to make sure nothing was wrong, not even a bruise. The doctors sent me home that night, and when I got home, I needed to be sure of something. I grabbed a kitchen knife and cut into my left index finger, just enough to cut through the very tip of the finger. It hurt like hell, but as I suspected, the bleeding only lasted for a moment, and the tip was back. It looked exactly like the old one, and I knew I wasn't hallucinating since my disembodied fingertip was still on the counter. This should have been the discovery of a lifetime. And for a brief second, it was. I ran to the hospital and chopped my finger off in the lobby. I let the disembodied digit hit the floor to the terror of everybody in the office, but within seconds, the finger was back. I grabbed my old finger and showed it to the nurses who surrounded me. Whispers of magic tricks went around until I chopped my hand off. Blood spewed for only a second, like the last bits of water stuck in a shower head, then stopped. My palm came back, then my fingers. Within moments, I was on the news. The Miraculous Healing Man was one headline I still remember. I was a celebrity, I was a philanthropist, and I had it all. I lived off of donations and whatever blood drives were willing to give me. I ended the blood crisis. I have oak blood, so I can give to anybody. A lot of my days were spent playing video games while a nurse tracked how many blood bags I produced in 8 hours. Occasionally, the nurse would have to phone a friend to get more bags. If I drank a lot of water that day, well, they'd fill up quite fast. My body healed around the needles, so prying them out was a bit of a chore. Eventually, I discussed it with the nurses to just keep the needle in there. It honestly wasn't worth the hassle. And since I declared this my full-time job, it wasn't like I was worried about what work would think. Sleeping with it in was a bit weird, but you get used to it. When I got a call from one of the many nurses who serviced me, asking if I was willing to personally donate my kidney to her son, I didn't know what to do. At that point, I wasn't sure if I could or couldn't regrow organs. I had a bit of a crush on her, though, so I went through with it. According to the doctors, the biggest complication regarding the surgery was figuring out how to actually keep my body from closing up the incision. They just had to have somebody constantly scraping the area with a scalpel to keep it open, alongside keeping me pumped full of anesthetics as my body fights them off quickly. All in all, it was a success, and by the end of the day, I was back home, giving blood again. I went back the next day, and yep, I had 2 fully functioning kidneys. There wasn't even a scar left from the incision. That's when a doctor entered the room and sat down with me. An 8-year-old boy needs a kidney. Are you willing to go through the surgery again? I didn't think. I just agreed. Later that day, the boy had a functioning kidney in him, and I wasn't left with any less than what I started with. They kept me in the hospital overnight. I wasn't sure why they never made me before, but I didn't really care. With all my donations, blood and organ-wise, paying for the surgeries or hospital stay wasn't an issue. At this point, people still donated money to me directly, and I didn't mind losing a day of blood donations. When I woke up that morning, a little girl was sitting down next to my bed, and a scrub-laden doctor sat up out of his chair. "This is Samantha. She's gonna need a heart transplant by next month or she'll die. Are you willing?" I was. I wasn't sure if the removal of my heart would kill me. I regrew a kidney twice in 3 days, and I was confident. That little girl had a heart at the end of the day, and so did I. They didn't permit me to leave then, either, but I understood that one. I was starting to get homesick at that point, and tried to check out in the middle of the night, but was stopped by various nurses begging me to stay, telling me about all the organs the hospital needs, how understaffed they are, how quickly they could solve major world problems if I just stayed a little longer. I gave 3 people a chance to live normal to semi-normal lives so far. I gave so much blood that at the time, I never saw any ads for blood drives. So why stop now? I figured I'd be a hero if I did this. I'd be a legend. I probably already was. I decided to go back to my room on the condition that a nurse gets me takeout and a Red Bull. I had both by the time I showered and made my way back to bed. After I ate, a doctor came in and put a large notebook on my desk. In it was every organ transplant needed in the hospital and how much blood would be needed. He asked if I would be okay to do these surgeries, and that they would take more organs out per surgery to maximize efficiency. They'd take my blood during these surgeries, too. I looked at the names. Every one of them was a life, a person who would mildly inconvenience me, but in return, I'd give them life. I'd give them a chance. I agreed and was rushed to surgery. This was the first time they didn't put me under anesthesia. I tried to fight, but they gave me just enough so that I couldn't move, but could feel everything. The needle in my skin, their hands haphazardly digging through me to collect my organs. Skin grafts were taken. I don't even know what they did with them. My plasma was siphoned out, and they stitched me back up. Once the anesthesia wore off, I decided to leave. I fought through the doctors, proclaiming how much of a miracle I was, and how much I was going to do for people. I didn't care. I wasn't a guinea pig. I'm a human, still. I tried to go, but I felt a small prick, and I was out. My healing factor is incredibly strong. So strong that during blood donations, my body would heal over the needles. So strong that doctors had jokes about me absorbing their tools. God knows how many are stuck inside of me as I write this. I doubt they bother extracting them anymore. I can heal around things, and that's what I woke up to. Both of my feet had been split open. and the bars of the hospital beds had been inserted through them. I was healed in my bed. No amount of struggling managed to free them. Normally, I would have just cut them off and hide until they grew back. This was a hospital room. There was no equipment around me since I couldn't get sick, and there was nothing to free myself with. Day after day, I was rolled into rooms, given barely enough sedatives to keep me from moving too much, damaging my valuable organs. The doctors and nurses would see me staring and talk about my miracle, and how I was such a good person for doing this. They spoke like I wasn't there. I could barely open my mouth to moan in pain, but every time they just shushed me like a toddler having a tantrum and continued to cut and pry. Several people needed to scrape the incisions so they wouldn't close. Clumps of ribboned flesh littered the floor after each surgery. They closed my blinds and took my phone. The only two remnants of my life I still had. Now I couldn't even know if it was a good day outside or not. They must have caught on to me staring. They didn't want me to damage my valuable eyes. I constantly had a nurse in the room, but I rarely spoke to them. All they'd talk to me about was some sick miracle I had, then talk about how little Susie gets to live a normal life while I'm stuck here being torn open and left there to heal. They stopped even sewing me up. They didn't want to waste any resources, so they just left my empty cavity open to heal over. Have you ever smelled blood? Probably, yeah. Have you ever smelled your own organs? Have you smelled what should have killed you? Seen what should have done you in for good? God, why was I given this ability? I don't even know what year it is anymore, what day it is, or how many of my organs litter the general populace. How many people have I saved? It's all a number at this point. I used to get letters and gifts, but now I sit in a dark hospital room that rarely gets cleaned. I'm lucky if they remember that healing factor or not. I gotta use the restroom every now and again. I'm lucky if I get a candy bar on Halloween or a small Christmas tree placed in the room. I'm lucky if they remember I'm still alive. During one of my surgeries, as I was staring into the fluorescent lights, hoping that maybe it was the light, I overheard a conversation and finally some unfamiliar pain. You get used to being ripped open and torn into. I wasn't used to this pain. It was a novel. The one thing I had left was pain, but at least it was something new. I looked down as they began to cut into my leg, tearing it off roughly. A small spurt of blood came out before the wound became a scab, then a lump, now the other one, then my arms. I could only look at the doctors as they threw my legs into a freezer. One of the nurses began to speak. Do you think it's really going to make a difference, as long as we don't tell them where it came from? Do you think starving children care? At this point, I think I was so jaded that the idea didn't seem strange. I existed as a living organ factory. How much worse is it to be an infinite food source? They started taking my legs at least once a day, my arms twice. I guess my healing factor has limits. My legs take an entire day to grow back when my organs are damaged, and whenever my legs begin to heal, they get cut off again. I don't fully understand my healing factor, but I understand the following. I can't age. I can't get sick or have infections. I don't need to eat much, but it heightens my abilities, and people who get my donations don't get my abilities. I do know a few more limitations. If my entire body is very heavily damaged, my body will focus on the most important organs like the heart, rather than healing my legs. Without food, healing slows, and now I know of another. I waited until my arms were back to write this, and I'm missing a finger. My other hand is much smaller. It looks like it belongs to a 9-year-old instead of me, however old I am. But it is stuck onto the arm of an adult man. Constant removal and healing must have damaged me. That's why I'm writing this, that's why I'm posting this. I want people to know where the organs are coming from. I want to find a nurse or somebody who can impersonate one to shoot me, right in the head where you know it will kill. They haven't touched my brain, and it's my one hope for death. It's the one unknown I have. It's the last hope I have. Don't slit my neck. It'll just heal. Nothing along those lines will work. I need to be shot dead, or just shot. I need some closure. Either I'll know that I can't die and I'm stuck like this, or it won't be my issue anymore. Last night, I managed to pickpocket a kind nurse who was willing to get close enough to me to allow me to steal it. I can almost assure you right now that when they do eventually figure out I have the phone, they'll find a way to make sure nobody gets close enough for me to steal another. I know I'm selfish. I want to get rid of what could be a life source for millions. I've given so much. I think I deserve just one thing. I don't know if it will even work, but please, somebody shoot me. At the very least, it will let me know there's no way out of this. At the very least, I'll have that bit of closure. So please, if you're a nurse or other medical professional, ask for the man who regrows organs. If they take you to me, please don't hesitate. Shoot me. Story number 2. I haven't been sleeping well lately. Yesterday evening, I came home from another wholly unremarkable, yet completely exhausting day at work, and set about the same routine I have grown wearily accustomed to for years now. I showered, sluggishly ate a microwaved meal that I barely tasted, and climbed into bed, bone-tired. But unlike so many nights as of late, I didn't toss and turn for long, restless hours. Within minutes of laying my head on my pillow, I was fast asleep. The dream seemed to begin the instant I shut my eyes. Surrounded by darkness, I stood before a spectral woman, a pale, captivating wraith, so breathtakingly grotesque that I could not look away even as her appearance frightened me to my core. Her cadaverous form was a gaunt composition of spindly bones, withered limbs, and desiccated skin like aged parchment. Death's cruel touch had long ago destroyed features that I somehow knew were the object of both great desire and bitter envy before the woman drew her final breath. In her life, she had possessed beauty, but in her grave, she could not escape the uncaring caress of decay and the disfiguring toll it took on her flesh. There were 2 hollow sockets where a pair of eyes had wilted away into nothing, but I could still feel her fearsome gaze transfixed on me. It was all too clear that she had not been robbed of her ability to see. Brittle wisps of thin, silvery hair fell to the moldering shoulders of a black dress, reduced to tattered ruins by rot. I wanted nothing more than to shield my eyes from the gruesome sight, to tear away from the horror before me, and run as fast as I could, until my legs would carry me no further. But instead I continued to stand, helplessly frozen. I could only watch, immobilized by a fear more powerful than I had ever thought possible. As the woman opened her shriveled mouth to reveal a tongue swollen with rot, and emitted a mournful wail of profound, immeasurable grief. Wave after wave of agonizing despair washed over me. I became engulfed in the wraith's excruciating sorrow, as it seeped through my flesh and into the marrow of my bones, and sank into my very being, poisoning me with her anguish until I felt painfully cold and as heavy as lead. "Please stop," I cried out, desperate to bring an end to our shared woe. "Stop it." But the wraith took no pity on me and continued to let out her tormented wail. I awoke, drenched in sweat. A sliver of moonlight peered out from between my closed curtains as I shakily sat up in bed, already knowing that I wouldn't be able to fall back asleep. I turned on the television and tried to settle into a comfortable position, but the beginning of a headache had started to throb behind my eyes, and my joints felt like they were full of glass shards. I listlessly watched TV until the sun rose, utterly dreading the approaching hour when I'd have to begin preparing for the long shift ahead of me. Though I wanted badly to stay in bed and try to sleep through the pain gnawing away at my body, I simply couldn't afford to miss work. I was getting ready to leave when my phone rang. I glanced down to see that the caller was Evan, a neighbor I had grown up alongside and who still lived next door to my childhood home. I finished pouring coffee into my thermos and answered, "Hello, Evan." "Hey there, old friend. I really hope I don't sound rude, but I'm actually about to head out. Is it all right if I call you back this evening?" "This can't wait," he replied, and the grave tone of his voice made me stop in my tracks. "I'm afraid I have some bad news." A terrible sense of foreboding clamped its icy hand around my heart. "What's wrong?" I asked apprehensively, afraid of what the answer would be. Evan sighed. "I woke up a few minutes ago when I heard ambulance sirens outside. They were there for your dad." The chilling trepidation in my chest gave way as my heart began to pound rapidly. I gripped the kitchen counter to steady myself. I felt hot and sick and dizzy all at once. My mouth struggled to form the words. "Do you know what happened?" "All I know is they took him to the hospital. I know your dad's always had difficulty figuring out his phone, so I suspected he didn't have you listed as an emergency contact. I wanted to let you know what's going on. I really think you need to get down here as soon as you can." I don't remember much about the rest of our conversation. My own voice sounded unfamiliar and far away as I thanked Evan for his help. I vaguely recall him assuring me that it was no problem and that he was sorry to be the one to deliver such awful news before I hung up the phone and grabbed my keys. The hour-long drive home felt like a much lengthier journey. I feared that I wouldn't make it to the hospital in time. Dad had always made his health a priority, particularly as he'd aged into his golden years. He jogged daily for exercise, maintained a balanced diet, and not once had I seen him indulge in a drop of alcohol or smoke a single cigarette. For him to have been struck down so suddenly was the worst kind of shock. I'd experienced abrupt, world-shattering grief before, when my mother was killed by a drunk driver the summer I turned 13. Nearly 2 decades later, I can still remember every somber line that was etched into the camp counselor's tanned face on the rainy morning when he called me into his office to tell me that I'd be returning home that day. Dad was the only family I had left, and the thought of never being able to see him again was devastating beyond measure. For many years, it had been just the two of us. With him gone, I would truly be alone in the world. My feet carried me through the hospital doors, down its hallways, and into an elevator, until finally I arrived at Dad's room. I nearly fell apart when I saw him lying in his hospital bed. My father looked like his own ghost, a frail wisp of the man who had always seemed larger than life to me. I gently touched his hand. His eyelids began to flutter. "Dad," I whispered softly, "I'm here." Dad's eyes flew open at the sound of my voice. Though the motion appeared to cause him great pain, he slowly turned his head to face me. "Son," he rasped, "thank God you're here." Evan from next door called me. "Try to get some rest. I'm not going anywhere." "No, there's something I need to tell you. We can talk about it later. Right now, all that matters is that you—" "No," Dad protested. Despite his fragile state, his voice was surprisingly sharp and insistent. It was a tone I'd rarely ever heard him use. "There isn't any time to waste. It won't be long now." "Don't talk like that, Dad." I wanted to squeeze his hand, But my father looked so feeble that I was afraid of hurting him. Everything's going to be okay. I gave Dad what I hoped I was a reassuring smile, but he only shook his head wearily. No, it's not. Dad paused to take a shaky breath. Did you have a dream last night? What? Did you? Dad pressed. Not just a dream, but a nightmare. Probably the worst one you can ever remember having. My smile fell. The hospital room suddenly felt much too warm. The strong chemical scent of disinfectant cleaning solution clung to every molecule in the air. It burned its way into my nostrils and down through my throat when I breathed, filling my lungs with its concentrated odor and making me feel sick to my stomach. Dad read my expression and let out a quiet sigh. I knew it. Though his voice had weakened, it carried the heavy weight of sad resignation. There's nothing that can be done. I peered over my shoulder, scanning the hallway behind me for any sign of a white coat or nursing scrubs. I didn't understand what Dad was saying. I only knew that something deeply unsettling was taking place. Please don't be afraid, son. That's the reason I never told you any of this before. I didn't want to scare you. I thought I was doing the right thing, and you'd be better off not knowing. Maybe that was a mistake. Dad, what on earth are you talking about? You saw her, Dad whispered. The ghost in your dream. The same cold hand that had gripped my heart earlier returned to clench me within its dreadful grasp once again. I never told you. You didn't have to, Dad said. You're not the first person to have seen her. She's appeared in our family's nightmares for decades. When a relative is about to die, one of us will dream of her. That's why she came to you. You and I are all that's left, and my time is fast approaching. I stared at my father in disbelief. Dad, I'm sorry, but that just isn't possible. Things like that aren't real. That's almost exactly what I said when your grandfather told me about her. I was around your age back then. He said that he'd seen her in a dream when he was a small boy, the night before his mother was shot during an armed robbery at the diner where she waited tables. I didn't believe him, of course. His mind was starting to go, and he'd get his memories mixed up and say all kinds of strange things. I told him as gently as I could that ghosts and premonitions only exist in our imaginations, and he told me that I'd find out just how wrong I was one day. And I did, just a couple of years later, when I had a dream of my own, and Pop had his final heart attack the next day. I wiped beads of perspiration from my brow with the back of my sleeve, and tried to swallow the lump in my throat. If what you say is true, then that means somebody would have known death was coming every time one of our relatives died. Dad nodded solemnly. So why not warn everyone in the family and try to prevent it from happening? That doesn't work. Remember your Aunt Helen's accident? I nodded. Several months after my grandfather's funeral, Aunt Helen, Dad's brother's wife, had suffered a seizure and fractured her skull in a fall. Uncle Dean died of flu complications not long after her death. Dean called me in the middle of the night, panicking and completely beside himself. He'd had the dream, you see, and he knew what it meant. He told me not to step foot outside of the house, that he was going to make Helen call into work and stay home within his reach at all times. She called me herself a few hours later and told me that my brother had completely lost his mind. I told her to just go along with it for the day, that he was still struggling to come to terms with our father's death and terrified of losing anyone else. And I swore that if he was still acting irrational, come tomorrow, then I'd head over there myself and make him listen to reason. She reluctantly agreed. And then what? She hung up the phone, went to go take a shower, and cracked her head open on side of the bathtub. Never had a seizure before in her life. Autopsy found a tumor in her brain. Well, that means it was only a matter of time before something like that happened. As tragic as it was, it had nothing to do with someone having a bad dream. Maybe, but I went to bed not even a month later and dreamed of the woman for a second time. She let out this horrible moan. I remembered the hideous wail from my dream and felt goosebumps prickle across my flesh. I ran down the hallway to check on you. When I saw that you were still asleep in your bed, I called Dean. He never answered the phone. I told your confused mother that I had to go check on him and sped away before she could even ask what was going on. When I got to his house, I pounded on the door before using the spare key under the doormat to let myself in. I found him lying crumpled in the same bathtub where his wife had fallen. He'd ended his own life. I furrowed my brow, struggling to make sense of Dad's words. But you told me Uncle Dean was sick. You said he had the flu, and that was why he stopped visiting us before he died. Your mother and I thought you were too young to understand. My brother was so heartbroken by Helen's death that he was barely getting out of bed. Wouldn't eat, couldn't sleep, refused to come stay with us no matter how many times I begged him to. I've always regretted not doing enough to help him, just like I've come to regret not telling you the truth about everything long ago. A distressing thought suddenly occurred to me. Dad, did Mom know about any of this? He turned his head away from me. We didn't talk about Mom often, but I knew Dad still missed her terribly. He'd never been the same since a late-night trip to the corner store near our house had taken her away from us. Did you have a dream before her accident? I leaned over Dad's bed to see his features contorted into a wounded grimace, silent tears streaming down his cheeks. I stumbled backwards so quickly that I nearly knocked my chair over. "Why didn't you warn her?" I shouted. Hot tears of anger and devastation pricked at the corners of my eyes. "You knew something was going to happen. You could have stopped it." "I tried," Dad cried. We'd been arguing. I fell asleep and had the dream, and I woke up to find a note from her. She wrote that she was taking a drive to clear her head. I jumped out of bed and drove around looking for her. That's when I saw the wreck, and Dad choked back a sob. I sank back into my chair, completely drained by the day's events. Between the crushing array of emotions I'd undergone over the past few hours and the potent scent of bleach in the air, the migraine hammering away at my skull felt like it was intensifying with every breath I took. "Why didn't you ever tell me the truth?" I asked quietly. "About Mom? About any of this?" "I'm sorry," Dad whispered. "I thought I was protecting you. But why us? Why our family?" I've asked myself the same question. Pop only spoke to me about her once, and Dean said he didn't tell him much either. Whatever else Pop knew, he took to his grave. All I can figure is that the answer has something to do with the rumors I heard when I was a kid about a business my grandfather had been involved in. What was it? Supposedly he worked for an unlicensed children's home that was later shut down. The methods they used to procure babies, well, they were cruel. Their usual tactic was to deceive struggling single mothers into signing temporary custody of their infants over to the home until they got back on their feet, only to immediately adopt the babies out to wealthy families in under-the-table deals. Sometimes they kidnapped babies from families living in poverty by posing as social workers offering assistance. And sometimes, if a mother resisted, they did whatever it took to separate her from her child. My grandfather's rumored job was to bring in 4 babies a month. He was employed at the children's home for nearly 15 years. I think the root of our family's torment lies somewhere beneath all the pain he caused. I blinked, taken aback by the heinous revelation. Dad had distanced himself from most of his family when he was young, and rarely mentioned them when I was growing up. Now I understood why. Are you saying that you think we're cursed? I'm saying that grief is a powerful emotion, and so is rage. Maybe both can linger long after a person is gone. We sat in silence for several moments before I spoke again. What now? I finally asked. Am I supposed to just sit here helplessly and wait for you to die? Dad tried to reach for my hand, only to find he was too weak to lift his own. It's not that simple, son. His voice had become faint. It was clear that our conversation had cost him what remained of his strength. But you said there was nothing anybody can do. I didn't tell you all of this because I'm dying. Son, I'm trying to warn you. I don't understand. It wasn't the chest pains that woke me up this morning. It was the dream I had. I froze. My stomach dropped as a horrific realization dawned on me. Dad, what are you trying to say? The ghost, Dad whispered, his eyes full of sorrow. I saw her too. Story number 3. It happened last night. I was just getting off work, and it was later than I had expected. Inventory night was always a monotonous affair at my job. This one had been worse, since we were badly understaffed. I was annoyed by the delay, and the fact that I was leaving almost an hour later than I had planned. I still had to pick up my medicine before the pharmacy closed, and I was not going to make it unless I moved fast. I rushed to my car and departed. Almost as soon as I got on the road, the sky opened up, and a downpour started, cementing the already crappy day that I was having. I hated driving in heavy rain. It was stressful enough just trying to see anything. But it really did not help that my tires were threadbare and honestly dangerous to have when it was raining that badly. I knew I would be hydroplaning back home if it kept up. I almost considered getting a hotel or resting in my car somewhere, but it looked like the storm was not ending soon, and I did not want to spend my night on the side of the road somewhere. I drove on and managed to pick up my prescription just before the pharmacy closed and started on my way back home. When I was about halfway there, the storm intensified. The rain was coming down in sheets, and I swear I saw a bolt of lightning lance through the sky and strike the ground only a few hundred feet from where I was driving. I started to look for a safe place to pull over when I heard a strange, static-like hiss. It sounded like someone was broadcasting the sound of a tire having its air let out. I was disturbed by the odd sound and looked around for its origin. My eyes left the road for only a moment, but that was all it took. I looked up just in time to see a blur of motion, and the hissing sound intensified. Then there was a crash and thud. I felt the car rolling over something, and I knew I had hit it. I managed to stop from swerving and losing complete control. I saw a safe place to pull aside in the downpour. I jumped out and walked over to where I thought I had seen the thing I hit. Whatever it was gone now. All I saw was a splash of oddly colored liquid being washed away by the rain. It must have been blood, but the color seemed strange, almost more of a fluorescent orange color than red. I kept searching for a few minutes to see what had happened, but I could not find anything. Another bolt of lightning struck nearby, and the thunderclap was almost instantaneous. I felt stupid for looking for the thing out there in the storm, and was worried I would get struck by lightning too. I moved back to my car and decided to check something before leaving. I looked at the hood and bumper. I saw traces of the same orange fluid being washed off by the rain. But the strangest thing I saw was a hard, almost bone-like substance that was jammed through the hood and stuck down into the top of the bumper. It almost looked like a deformed deer antler, but the size and shape were all wrong. I tried to pull it free, but it would not budge. I considered myself lucky that that thing had not gone a different direction and speared right into the glass and struck me. Whatever it was strong and was lodged in my car really good. I figured I could investigate further tomorrow, and another even closer bolt of lightning convinced me to get back in my car and get out of there. I managed to make it home without further incident and was exhausted. I was just glad to be done with the day. And as I stepped out of my car, the garage door finished closing behind me. Once the sound of the rain outside was drowned out, I turned back to my car as I heard an odd hissing sound and a bizarre chiming, like someone striking a tune on a xylophone. I looked at the hood of my car again and saw the strange, bone-like object. As I stared at it, the single overhead light bulb in the garage began to flicker. The sight was eerie, and I wondered again just what the hell I had hit with my car. I decided I was too tired to deal with it that night, so I went inside and went straight to bed. Normally, falling rain helps me rest easier, but I had trouble finding sleep despite how tired I was. The rhythm of the rain felt strange, and there was an unusual amount of lightning strikes that continued to fall, many of which felt too close for comfort. When I finally dozed off, I had a bizarre dream. I was in a dark forest, and it was raining heavily. I could not find my way out, and I felt drained. I walked out into a clearing and was struck by lightning. I remember the sensation was so strange. It did not hurt, but felt like the electricity energized me. But something struck me from behind, and I fell. I fell so hard that it felt like something had come broken when I landed. A part of me had come off. I could not feel my hands, and when I looked down, they were gone. The last thing I heard before I woke up was a distorted hiss that morphed into one intelligible word: return. I woke up in a cold sweat. I realized the window to my bedroom had opened up somehow. I figured I must have left it open slightly, and the wind did the rest, but I don't remember leaving it open. It was 4 a.m, and despite how tired I still felt, I knew I would not be able to get back to sleep. Instead, I went to the garage and turned on the light. I looked at that strange object lodged in my car. The thing has a strange glow to it, like it was absorbing the light overhead somehow. I tested a theory and turned the light off again, and surely enough, the object had a dim phosphorescent glow. I started rummaging through my tools and managed to find a pair of pliers, shears, and a pry bar. I knew it might cause some cosmetic damage to my car, but I figured it was already damaged at that point, and I had to study this thing a bit closer. After working at the edges and pulling and prying, and in one case cutting the sections back from the car, I was able to pull it free. It was strange, but when I held on to it, it felt very warm. It was so cold in the garage that I had not expected it, and nearly dropped it upon examination. I was still baffled about what the thing could be. I looked up the material online, and even took a picture, and compared it to a variety of animal bones, antlers, and even a host of rocks, and some bioluminescent algae. But nothing fit. I spent most of the early morning examining the thing, and I had to leave it alone for a while when I realized I had to get ready for work. Before I was out the door, I got a call from my coworker, Ben. I answered, and he was quick to ask, "Hey, how's it going? Did you still have power over there?" I was confused by the call just to ask that, but I realized the storm was still ongoing. So many people might have lost power. I responded, "Yeah, no outages over here, just some lights flickering. Though, why, what's up?" "Well, it's crazy, but the store is out of power. A lot of downtown is too. It's strange. The lines are intact, but something just killed them. I figured I would call and tell you if you did not already get the notification, but people are being told to stay home since we can't work." I was surprised the whole grid was down, but thankful I was not being affected yet. Oh, wow. Well, thanks for the update. See you tomorrow if everything is back to normal, I guess. Yeah, stay safe out there. He responded, and the line went dead. I figured that despite the loss in pay, it was not all bad. It would be an extra day off for me. So, I settled in on my couch and caught up with a few shows I had been watching. I zoned out binge-watching TV until it was into the evening. The storm had not relented at all, and I saw the lights flicker repeatedly. Near 10 o'clock, the power finally went out. I had readied myself and had candles and flashlights all set. But the way the storm had whipped up was troubling. I heard the wind howling and the lightning began striking more and more. I sat down on my bed and put some headphones on, trying to drown out the terrible sounds of the storm, while I read a book and tried to get sleepy. It was starting to work, and I was about to nod off when I heard a disturbing sound. It sounded like it was coming from just outside the room, and I heard it clearly despite my headphones. It sounded like a raspy whisper, and then the static hissing sound I had heard yesterday was back. I stood up and grabbed the flashlight, panning around my bedroom in a paranoid state. I did not know what was happening, but I did not like hearing that sound again. Something felt wrong. I waited for a few minutes on alert. Finally, I released the breath I didn't realize I had been holding. After exhaling and turning to sit back down in my bed, I heard the whisper again. I heard it take on a more definitive voice, and the word it uttered sent a chill down my spine. Return. The same voice, the same word I had heard in my nightmare. It sounded like it was in my mind, but not just in my mind this time. It was just outside my bedroom door. I thought I might be going crazy, but I strained my ears to try and listen. To my horror, I heard a large dragging sound coming from outside. It was like someone was pulling a bag that was too heavy, and the sound echoed throughout my house and in my mind. I grabbed my phone from the nightstand and was about to call 911 since I thought an intruder had broken in, when I saw that my phone was completely dead. When I shone the flashlight on it, I saw that the area by the charging cable was blackened and scorched. It had been burnt by an electrical overload. It was not just dead, it had been destroyed by something. I heard the heavy dragging sound again, and the voice calling out once more, clearer than last time, and more forcefully, "Return." I started to panic. I had no weapons in there with me, nothing to fight with and no means to call for help. When I looked around, I saw on the shelf near my nightstand the strange object I had recovered from my car yesterday was glowing fiercely. It started to emanate waves of sickly colored light, and for a stupid moment I considered using the sharp edges of it as a potential weapon. But as soon as I took hold of the object, a lightning bolt struck the ground just outside my house, and the hissing sound became a primal roar. The demand to return grew louder and louder. To my horror, my door began to heave as something heavy crashed against it. I was paralyzed with fear and thought I was going to die. Then the door finally broke off and I heard a massive form shamble into my bedroom. The air around me felt charged, like the ozone was being agitated. I stole a glimpse at the nightmare thing that had broken in. The effort hurt my eyes, and what I beheld was difficult to put in words. It appeared as a vague, undulating mass of orange limbs, enveloped by sparking arcs of electrical current. The whole sight was an impossibility. I thought I might scream or cry out, but I just looked on in dumb confusion at the blasphemous mass. I gripped the object I was holding in numb terror. Suddenly, the sharp edge of the surface cut my hand and finally caused me to react to something beyond incomprehension at the sight before me. I cried out from the cut as the monstrous bulk closed in towards me. The thing was less than a foot in front of me then. It stopped moving and made a screeching sound, followed by a sharp hiss. Then the familiar word, perhaps the only sounds intelligible to humans that it could utter. Return. My broken mind finally yielded the answer. I looked at the thing, and its shifting, distorted image hurt my eyes. Then I looked at the pulsing object in my hands, humming with the ambient energy being given off by the eldritch nightmare in the room. Then I finally considered the word return. I forced myself up on trembling knees, terrified, but committed to this last-ditch effort. I held out my hands and offered the object to the creature. There was a long and terrible pause, followed by a clicking sound and another sharp hiss. Then, in an instant, the object was snatched from my hand, and a sound like sharp rock digging into flesh was heard. Then I saw a change. Though my eyes could not fully focus on the distorted mass of limbs and energy, I did notice in the general area of the mass, where a head or face might be, there now stood a familiar antler-like formation. The creature hissed, and the sound caused a wave of energy to pulse through its body and sympathetically course through the length of the horn antler of the thing. In the next moment, the air felt charged with electricity, and a brilliant flash of light heralded a literal lightning strike straight through my ceiling and right where the thing had been. I was blinded momentarily by the light. When I was able to look again, the creature was gone. There was a large hole in my roof and rain was falling into my bedroom, but I was confident that I was finally alone again. I have no clue just what the hell it was that I saw, though I think whatever it was what I hit on the way home last night. Somehow, I had hit it on the way back, and that part of it had broken off on my car. Then it followed me back. I don't know how it was able to track me down and find me. I'm just glad I still had that thing, whatever part of its body that it was, because if I had not been able to return it, well, I don't want to think what would have happened. The storm has stopped too, not just the lightning, but the rain as well. I don't know how, but I know that thing was connected to the storm, particularly the lightning in some way. Whatever the case, I am grateful to be alive. I don't think I will be driving in any thunderstorms again anytime soon. Stay safe on the roads out there and be careful. You never know what you might find, or what might find you. You've reached the end, but the shadows haven't left you. If this story unsettled you, prove you survived. Like this video, subscribe to Spectral Shadows, and leave a comment with the part that haunted you most. The darkness is always waiting, and so are we. Until next time, don't turn off the lights.